As a developer, when a build fails, sometimes it's difficult to see the cause of the failure. This is particularly tricky if we have test failures. It's hard to tell at a glance what went wrong. Often, all we get is a failed build and a long console output that may or may not guide us to the problem. Of course, we can open the test report and have a look at all the failing tests. But even this might not give us the overview of failures that we're looking for. We can see which tests failed, and if we click on them, we can see the individual test failures. But we don't get a view of whether the test failures are related, or have a feel for any underlying problems that might have caused more than one failure. It's a little bit easier to navigate test failures if we run them in the IDE, because we can click on each test individually and see if the results look similar. Still, we still have to navigate through each test failure individually to find out what's going on, and make hypotheses on whether there's a single cause of multiple failures or just a lot of individual tests failing. This can be even more complicated when we start looking at failures in CI. We can see lists of jobs that have failed, and we can see the output from any failed build, but it's much more difficult to drill down to the individual failures, or step back and get an overview of related failures. If you look at a build failure in Develocity, you'll get a lot more information about what caused an individual build to fail. This build scan for our failed build shows us immediately that there were 7 test failures. And since Develocity 2025.2, there's even AI-powered failure grouping. So we can see that for these 7 test failures, 6 of them failed for the same reason. If we drill in, we can see a list of test classes that had failing tests, and see which of the individual tests failed. This list may be a subset of all the failures rather than a complete list, which you can use to get a sense of the types of tests that were impacted. Clicking into one of these test failures gives us more information about the test failure here in the build scan. Or we might want to use the information from the build scan to reproduce the problem locally. If there are a lot of failures, this AI analysis gives us even more value. However, a lot of failures may take a bit more time for the AI to process. So when you navigate to a build scan with many failures, you'll see a message that the failures are being analysed by AI, while the algorithm sorts through the failures for you. While the grouping is in progress, you can navigate through the individual test failures and have a look at them, just as you would with any list of test failures. For individual test failures, you can see how many times the test was run in the last 7 days, how many times it passed or failed, and navigate to a chart of the test history to get a view of how often it fails and when. Once the analysis is complete, the button at the top will let you know the results are available, and you can click on the link to view these test failures grouped so similar test failures are together. In this case, we can see that of these 58 test failures, 14 are for one reason, 12 are for another reason, and another 8 failed for a different reason. So now we have an idea that it's not 58 different failures, nor is it likely to be a single cause. We do know that we can look at each cluster of failures and fix multiple tests in one go. The build scan doesn't just group test failures into useful chunks, it also groups build failures. So here we have 3 task failures. We can see that all 3 tasks failed for the same reason. None of them could publish to Sonotype. If we click on the link to show all the tasks, we get taken to the Failures tab on our build scan, and it shows all 3 failures. Here we can see more information about all of the failures. And for any individual failure, we can navigate to the failure history using this link. We can see which other builds have failed with the same problem in the last week. We can see this is a problem which has happened quite frequently in the last week. So if we can identify the root cause, we should be able to prevent future builds from failing for the same reason. Build and test failures are both grouped right at the top of the build scan, so if the build has failed for any reason, you'll be able to see it straight away. The AI analysis will enable you to see which failures are related and which ones are not. And a summary of the failures can point you in the right direction to solve a problem that's causing multiple failures. When you combine this with other functionality that's already available in Develocity's build scans, like, for example, test history and failure history, and identification of flaky tests, this helps you troubleshoot test and build failures, whether that build was run locally or in an environment like CI. Thanks for watching.